Well, let's go ahead and get started because I've got 12:01, so we want to keep on track here. But welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this panel discussion. If I knew then what I know now, real talk from staffing agency owners, which is kind of a mouthful, right? My name is Sherry Fisher with Scale Funding. Prior to joining Scale, I spent 15 years working directly in the staffing industry. So I like to call myself one of you guys. I worked for three different agencies, both national and privately owned. And then 6 years ago, took this opportunity with Scale as an industry supplier, providing invoice factoring to agencies. This discussion today has nothing to do with funding. I simply enjoy tapping into my connections to bring these types of sessions to our network. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this session today, so you're aware of that. We'll send a follow-up email in the next couple of days that will include a link to the recording. Any questions or comments you have throughout today's session, enter those into the Q&A section, and we'll keep an eye out for those. And then we are going to be discussing three specific topics today. But of course, agency ownership and leadership involves way more than that. So we certainly welcome questions that are off topic. And if we run out of time to answer those, we can take those offline. I'm sure the owners on the call here today would be happy to do that. So let me just give you a quick backstory on how we got here today. So a year ago, I wrote an article that we published, and that article was titled, What 8 Staffing Agency Owners Wish They Knew Starting Out. And as the title would indicate, I asked 8 different staffing agency owners to contribute a paragraph, a topic of their choice, a lesson learned, or a tip, if you will, that really contributed to their success. So fast forward to today, I asked 3 of those agency owners to participate in this panel discussion, primarily discussing their topic from that article. And I guess a side note for this too, when we send out the link to the recording and the slide deck, we'll include a link to that original article, just in case you want to read it in its entirety. So let's get started. Joining me today are 3 staffing agency owners, Andrea, Mark, and Dot. Before we jump into the topics, I'm going to let each of them just take a minute and introduce themselves. And let's start with Andrea.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Brenholz, and I am the president and CEO of ATR International. We are a nationwide staffing firm in IT, engineering, manufacturing, and professional services. My parents started the company about 37 years ago, but thankfully on our 30th anniversary, they both got to fully retire, and I took over the business. So COVID was a great quick lesson of how to be a CEO during a crazy pandemic. So thanks so much for having me.
Okay, let's move on to Mark.
Sounds good. Well, my name is Mark Isfeld. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I am the owner and president of Top Notch Personnel, light industrial clerical agency, very classical. We do a lot of work in Wichita. We're known as the air capital. And so the bulk of our clients are manufacturing aircraft parts that go into Boeing or Textron, Cessna, or Bombardier airplanes. I do have a prior history in that I worked in the direct hire business for about a dozen years in agriculture and banking for a firm by the name of Ag One Source. Thrilled to be here today.
And then moving on to Dot.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dot Peterson. I'm the owner of A Higher Power. I have been in staffing since 1999, working my way up from being a temp all the way to being the owner of my current situation. My background is in temp and temp to hire and administrative, light industrial, and then we added some elements of hospitality. Currently, the bulk of my business is in a very odd niche of convention and event staffing. It's kind of it's an unusual one. There's not a lot of us that do it. So that's what I've been doing now. As a matter of fact, my office is in Denver, where it is very, very cold, but I'm sitting here in Orlando right now where it is not. Because we just staffed a convention. We had, I think 175 people at it. So anyway, that's where I am right now.
Lucky you picked a great place to staff.
I sure did. Yes.
Okay, let's jump into the first topic. And so this is Andrea's topic. This is what she contributed to my original article. So her topic paragraph was actually titled Building Success Through Innovation and Longevity. So really capturing that balance between technology and people. Andrea, your parents started the business, as you mentioned, in 1988. There wasn't a lot of technology back then, but they started the business with a people first mentality. And although technology has obviously been integrated into your business now, you mentioned that you've really kept that people first mentality. A lot of the phrases that you used in your paragraph are things like relationships are the foundation. You talked a lot about trust. My favorite, I think, is when you mentioned doing right by people. Now, these words could reflect commitment to your internal team, but they could also, encapsulate a mentality toward candidates or your clients. So if you could just share some examples of what you mean by ATR's people first mentality and maybe a couple of things that those listening could take away and implement right away tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes in staffing, we just become very reactionary. We just kind of go with the punches, go with the flow, and we don't always take a breath and realize what's happening around us, which I am in the situation, I think, all the time. And I think, Dottie, you said the same thing. So the biggest thing for us that we've had to bring back to the forefront is that people first mentality. With COVID, as I said, I think it was just us all trying to just get through it. But we lost that sight of trying to take care of our contractors, even trying to take care of our clients, right? We were so much of how do we get through this? How do we just get new business, right? But really, the easiest business to get is to just grow within the clients that we have. And even for our contractors, we implemented a contractor care program, right? We need to make sure that they are the front lines of what's going on there, our representation of our company. So we need to make sure that they're taken care of. And honestly, if we have a good relationship with our contractors and our clients, it releases some of that liability or reduces some of that for us, hopefully. With that, we have better relationships that can usually soothe things over with conversations, right? Rather than lawsuits when we have some of those good relationships. So the contractor care program was huge for us. We have a separate team that handles that. It's being an addition to our recruiters that will do reach outs, they do surveys, and making sure our contractors are happy while they're on assignment.
So it's a lot of like verbal and written engagement, really. Okay. Okay,
Yes.
that's fantastic. All right. I don't know, Mark or Dot, if you have anything to add to that people first mentality portion before we move on. You feel free to jump in now. Otherwise, we can just keep moving along. Okay. One of the things that I think about, Andrea, you might remember at TechServe Alliance a couple of years ago, they had a keynote speaker there. His name was Ryan Leak, Leak, and he's written several books. He was a phenomenal speaker. And one of the things that he mentioned that has stuck with me to this day is that as a business owner or a leader, one of the things that you need to really take an honest look at or understand is what's it like sitting across from me, right? So having that understanding of what your internal team feels like sitting across from you. And I almost think even with candidate experience and with client experience, understanding what those experiences are like is almost the first step in creating that people first mentality, right? How can you build a program or improve on your business if you don't know what the current experience is like for everybody who works with you? So it just made me think of that speaker when you were talking there. So, okay, let's move on to the technology part of your paragraph, Andrea. You've seen the tech landscape evolve over the years, obviously. So how do you decide what to automate versus where to stay high touch with your team?
Yeah, so to me, our goal is always what can we do to make us faster? As we know, for the IT and engineering industries, we're always competing sometimes with large recruiting and sourcing teams that are overseas. That doesn't always help us as a smaller, medium-sized business, right? When all of our teams sit in the US. So we have to be creative. We have to think of different ways to just keep up with that and eventually become better. So with that, I think my first suggestion would really just be figure out where your gaps are and what's taking up too much time from your recruiters and your sales team. And sometimes those answers will surprise you, that you would never think that, oh, well, having to send this specific email back and forth, whether it's to back office or to the candidate to fill out this form, is what's taking up so much time. Okay, great. Now let's find a tool that can help make that faster, or like you said, automate it. So it's definitely going to be a long journey, because that's something that we're going through right now with I think all the new AI tools that are popping up every day. And it's exciting, but I think it's also overwhelming. So definitely we've been trying to take it one tool and one problem at a time.
Well, I think it's easy to get distracted by all the new technology. And I remember in the original article, Andrea, you wrote one of your suggestions was to start with your ATS, right?
Mhm.
Like make sure you have an ATS that you love and that works well for your team, and then build from there, right? Like whether it's
Yes.
a texting tool or some other type of engagement tool. So I thought that was a great suggestion. So
Yeah.
what about where technology has allowed your team to be more human and spend more time, on relationships rather than just the process or the tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely when we are able to cut out that extra time where they're filling out forms or sending out emails or double checking what data, what have you, that definitely frees up the salespeople to go out and spend more time with their clients, right? I think we have to get back to in person, being there, building those relationships as we're learning is starting to be so crucial. And it's even opening up different lines of business for us within those clients. For the recruiters, the less emails they have to send, the more relationship or stronger relationship they can build with the contractors, and in turn actually create a lead generation program. I think we forget that our recruiters can be one of our best assets in that sense, and giving us just information of where we could be building and trying to get some new business. So all of those little things that allow them to free up their time allows them to focus more on these items.
Good advice. Yep. What about biggest mistakes you see agencies make when they over automate? We talked about being excited by new technology, right? I'm sure you had peers that have made mistakes. What do you say there?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised, but not surprised that there are starting to be fully AI staffing firms now. I heard a couple conversations at the TechServe conference about it, and to me, that just opens up your world to just, I think, also bad reputation, but also opens you up to a lot of liability. You don't know what's going on out there. You don't know who's showing up to the job, who isn't, all of that. So I think to me, it doesn't allow you to create a business and build a business that reflects you and your values, right? When it's just a computer creating something for you. So I think to me, that's not what our industry is built on. And regardless of how much technology gets brought into our industry, I don't think that would ever fully serve us and allow us to serve our clients the way we know we can.
Yeah, that frightens me.
Yes.
I mean, call me old school. But I don't know, something being completely AI
Yeah.
automated. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of
we
freaky.
are in the people industry, so let's keep it that as much as we can.
Right, exactly. Okay. Now let's talk about evaluation of tools or technologies before implementing them. And we actually just went through this here. I mean, we're not a staffing agency, we're a bank, but we to evaluate technology, and somebody who was kind of in charge of this process just wanted us to, send an email with some suggestions or advice. And I thought, well, shouldn't we have a checklist or a scorecard or like, shouldn't there be some thought into, into how and who, we evaluate this technology. So what advice do you have there?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're actually going through this right now and reevaluating our ATS and even our CRM. So it is a big project, but we've tried to identify a team that would be the consistent faces on all of the demos. So I don't have to be on it or a VP of recruiting. It's the team that's actually demoing it and giving the feedback of whether they think it would work for their day. So to me, I think that's the crucial part in this. It doesn't matter what I say. I'm not doing their daily work and working with the contractors or in the CRM or the ATS. So my opinion sadly doesn't always matter in this situation, but I think giving the power back to them will also help them adopt whatever tools we bring into the company faster. As we know, adoption is something that people don't always like to do. Recruiters and salespeople, they're used to their daily process. They know what they need to do every day and they just want to crank it out as fast as they can. But there are times where we just need to evolve. And as a company, we just have to accept that the technology is coming and we need to absorb it, accept it, and live it and learn it so we can be bigger and better.
Yeah, for sure. Dot, Mark, anything to add to this technology piece?
I had a couple of thoughts while I was listening to Andrea talk. The first one is I have a master's degree in communications. And so one of the guiding principles I've used in our business is you have to communicate with people how they want to be communicated with. I've been recruiting long enough that I can remember sending a referral through a fax machine. I don't even know how to find a fax machine anymore. But I also remember when we tipped from the bulk of our candidates wanted to be called to texting. And so I think that you have to evaluate the stage they are in your process, and use the communication method that can get their attention, which seems to be texting a lot of the time now. But then fundamentally at the end, I have to go back to my grandfather and my father, very entrepreneurial guys. They were in the manufacturing sector, but they really drilled one concept into me, and that is that people do business with people, be that our candidates, be that our clients. You've got to touch them as a human when they want that human to be there. So communicate how they want, but make sure that human is there at the right spots.
Yeah, that's great advice. Dot, anything more to
Yeah,
add?
I would say so. Again, I'm old too. I mean, like when I started staffing, we staffed out of 3-ring binders. Okay. My first sales calls were out of the yellow pages. There are people on this call right now that probably do not know what yellow pages are. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that. That's a different call. But I will say that if I had to come up with kind of like how to use the way that I choose to use technology in my office is I will use it to reach people, but I absolutely will not use it to pick people. So what I mean by that is that has got to come from my gut. Just because a computer says that's a good person, especially with chat GPT and stuff, they can make resumes now. Like if it's analyzing itself, it's going to give you props on someone that maybe when you meet them, you're just like, I don't think so, you know? So I guess for me, like I said, I've even talked with some of our temps and because of what we do, there's a lot of app organizations. They just work off of apps. So it's just all AI. And they said when they get calls and they realize it's AI, they just hang up, like the interviews and things like that. So people are starting to feel maybe a little not heard, not appreciated by that. That's just my thoughts and feelings. It's what I'm going off of when we choose how to. I'll notify you with the automation about an opportunity, but we will actually, a human being will talk to you and assess you about that opportunity. So
Yeah, and
that's my guidance on that.
that's a great thought because now that you say that, I have received plenty of spam texts asking me if I want a data entry position. Um, so, technology doesn't always get it right either.
And actually, as the owner, you're probably like, yes, I do.
Like, that actually sounds
I
pretty
think
easy.
that sounds grand, to be
Let me
honest
rest
with
my
you.
brain for a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep. Okay. Let's move on to our next topic. And Mark, this this is what you wrote about in the original article, and it was on developing a strong peer network. So why do you think so many owners struggle to prioritize this early on?
You know, what I always come back to on this topic is early in my career, I worked for a Fortune 100 business. And when I had an IT problem, we had a guy for that. When I had an HR problem, we had a young lady for that. When you're running your own company, a lot of times you don't have a guy for that, or you don't have a gal for that. You've got to get out and do it. And so I think it's when the bigger issues come about, that you've got to have somebody that you can call and go, have you beat this problem? And I know one of the things you and I talked about, Sherry, is that when I took over this staffing business, I had never worked in staffing. I worked in recruiting, but I had never worked in staffing. And so when my wife and I purchased this business, I had to learn real quick about three different topics. And so after about 18 months, I'd sucked the seller's brain dry and I'd learned as much as I could. And at that point, I said, I'm missing something. And so I reached out to my software vendor, my ATS vendor, and I just said, can you introduce me to a couple of other customers that are like me? And she said, I'll do you one better. I'll refer you to TempNet. And so 10 years ago, I joined that organization, TempNet, and I've now got 70 peers that if I pick up the phone and call them, they will answer. And so that peer-to-peer network, it has paid for that membership on a yearly basis. But when the chips are really down, like, oh crap, we're in COVID. What's this PPP loan thing? We would hold daily webinars and we would teach each other what we'd learned. And so having that availability to get to peers, go back to what I said first. Somebody has climbed this mountain and figured it out. Somebody has beat this problem and knows a solution. And so if you have a developed peer network through an association or through, maybe neighboring markets to you, you're going to have ready access to ideas and solutions.
Yeah. Well, and I know TempNet is set up in such a way that it's a non-competitive, structure. But I think aside from that, even if you belong to other groups or associations, I think people need to get out of their own way and get out of their head that competition is all bad, right? I mean, there are things that we can learn from each other, whether you're competitive or not. Like just this morning on ASA, for those who belong to American Staffing Association, on ASA Central, one of the staffing leaders had a message in there that they had started like a bullhorn group, like for any staffing agency who is currently using bullhorn. They started a group so they could share tips and success stories and how to use the tool properly. And here, that they're going to be competitors on that call, but they're just trying to make themselves better as an industry. And I just think that's the mentality that leaders and owners need to have, whether they belong to TempNet or whether it's another association. So now you did give one example, Mark, like the PPO situation during COVID. I'm sure that there are other examples you can give where your peer network has solved a challenge or helped you seized an opportunity.
Well, and I can give you one example, and then I've got a tool that I use whenever I get around other people that own businesses. The other example I can give, I'll never forget this. So as we were coming out of COVID, we'd all rode the PPP wagon and done everything we needed to do and track the payrolls. But on December the 27th, I don't remember the year, it was the last couple of weeks of Trump's administration the first time around, but they passed that law and it allowed us to double dip and do ERC as well. I'm drinking coffee. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I read this and I'd educated myself enough on it. I said, this is big. And so I reached out to the TempNet administration and we had a Zoom call that afternoon with, I want to say 99% of our members on the call. And we reached out to one of our vendors that had experience in ERC and we had them talk. And so we were ahead of the curve on that particular bucket of cash. And that was a great place to do that. But the tool that I do when I'm around other owners, if I get into an ownership, a CEO group that's non-specific to staffing, I'm always asking two questions. And I don't know if this comes from being in BNI or any other places, but I always ask two questions. What's working for you? and what's not working for you. And if you have that level of conversation with other business owners, you're going to pick up on, oh, that's a darn good idea. Maybe I should do that. Or, hey, I've solved that problem and this is what we did. And so I had this conversation with my son this weekend. He's 18 years old. He's a college freshman, and we were struggling with something. And I said, we just need to reach out to somebody and go, how did you beat this? And it's just different when you own a company, because it just forces you to think differently. You think about more than just yourself. And so you got to keep asking questions till you find the solutions to take care of the people that matter.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So how do you build or find the right peer group, and like, where do you start? If you could give some tips to those on the call.
So outside of associations, the other places that I've looked for peers, now it's not just for this purpose, but I look in neighboring markets. So I'm in Wichita, Kansas. The other major markets around me are Kansas City, Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska, Denver, Tulsa, Oklahoma City. And so I've built some relationships in some of those other markets with two intents in mind. One is, I may be in Lincoln or I may be in Omaha. Hey, can I just stop by and visit and see how your office operates? You can do the same thing if you're in Wichita, and maybe you'll pick up an idea there. The other thing is, I'm still young enough, even though we've all decided we're old, but I'm still young enough. Maybe I want to do an acquisition down the road. And
Yeah.
so knowing who the players are, especially in Tulsa, Oklahoma City for me, because there's a lot of aircraft part manufacturing in those towns as well, supporting Boeing and Spirit and those kinds of things. So I think just look at your neighboring markets and you'll find other people like you, that you can have those conversations and what's working for you, and maybe get some ideas.
Yep. You mentioned something that stood out to me. You mentioned the CEO group that you belong to, non-staffing. And I think that is really key. Like in Minnesota, well, I think every state has a National Association of Women Business Owners, for those listening who are female. But we sponsor that group, and there are several staffing agency owners in the group. But aside from that, just as business owners, they're supporting each other. They're supporting each other's businesses. They're supporting each other through collaboration, things that just come up that are the same for all business owners, whether it's staffing or not. So when you mentioned your CEO group, it just made me think that there are lots of organizations out there. So
yeah, well, and the other place that I've looked for those, and there's a lot of people from these backgrounds. I'm a proud graduate of Kansas State University. Go Wildcats! In one of my CE groups, it's very purple. Okay, there's a lot of people that went there. The other one that I'm in process of trying to get stood up, is I'm a member of the West Wichita Catholic community. Raised my kids through Catholic schools, and so I've got a CEO group coming together of all Catholic gentlemen. And there's going to be a faith-based component to it, that I think is important as well. And so outside of staffing, those are good networks to have. When you have a bad day, there's no better place to be than the Catholic Business Owners Group.
Right. Yep, exactly. Dot, Andrea, anything that either of you have to add regarding building peer networks?
You better have one for sure, because I come from a franchise background. That is your peer network. Whatever you've got that question, but you need human resources, IT, blah, blah, blah. They've got it. I went from that to being my own. And that was just like, oh my gosh, I thought I knew a lot more than I know. I was a lot more handheld than I cared to admit. So I could have used a peer network, but hey.
Yeah, well, and things are always changing.
Sometimes I'm the before picture.
Yeah, right. Well, I remember after being in the industry for, I don't know, whatever, 8 years, you think you know it all, right? But it just felt like, every day there was something constantly changing or something new. And I think that's what actually made me love the industry as well. But there was always something new or something changing. So you do need to have that peer network. Andrea, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I think peer networks are always great. As much as we trust our own, even executive team or leadership team to know things, sometimes they don't, or they'll leave at a time where you need them the most, right? It's great to have that peer team to lead on that can help guide you, because guaranteed somebody has been in a similar situation recently and they can guide you right through that process or know exactly who can help you through that. So I've been part of California Staffing Professionals now, I think for about 3 years, and that just for me, I've learned so much and I've grown a lot as a leader just from that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, fantastic. Let's move on to our third topic, diversification. So this is what Dot wrote about. Now, I mean, I have to laugh. Dot, when you wrote your paragraph, I actually titled it something that you had included in the paragraph, which was "Don't get fat, dumb, and happy." And that term or that phrase really resonated with readers. But you talked about how, success can sometimes make owners complacent, and how making sure that you're diversifying your business helps protect about that. So maybe first just start off by sharing your story, right? And how your business has evolved.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, my background actually was from a franchise office of a nationally owned staffing agency. And when I entered, it started in 1999, we were mostly administrative, temp and temp to hire. And then as I was there, I added in light industrial. And then as I was there, I added in hospitality. And then just because of a weird phone call we got, we ended up getting into conventions and events, and we were really good at it. It's just an odd thing. And for whatever reason, it worked with my personality. And so we would get more, we'd get more, we'd get more. We got enough that finally I'm just letting the pipeline on everything else disappear because this was so great. We were making money. Our people were happy. It wasn't easy, but it was fun. It was the right kind of chaos. Loved it. And then there was a virus, and that if you did conventions and events, that was the short straw for 2020. And at the end of March, we'd lost all of our business through the end of May. And by the end of May, I'd lost it through the end of the year. We, in fact, did not have another convention until June of 2021. Our first one we lost was in February. So we went 16 months without any conventions, and I had let everything else go. So,
so that was your lesson.
Pardon me?
That was your lesson, right?
Yes. And I wish I had had it. It wasn't the right time to try and build it either. Like no one was taking phone calls. Hey, I know you guys are shuttered at home, but do you need a receptionist? Like that wasn't happening. So yeah, I was just on it. And thanks to that PPP and that ERC, I'm here today, but had it not been for those things, I would not have been. So luckily for me, it gave me an opportunity to rebrand. I like to refer to myself as God's favorite. So it all worked out for me. Okay. I actually technically still have the same phone number I had before. I mean, it put me out of business completely, and I had to rebrand. That's a young woman's sport. I'm doing it, but it's like, I'm starting from scratch, luckily with some knowledge. But if I could save anything, it would be this. Don't do what I did. You need to have something to fall back on. You have to assume that something could go wrong in something. And don't just do that. Have plan B. Plan B, because if you don't, what if there is no PPP? What if there is no ERC? Then, if you don't have a B or a PPP or an ERC, I mean, your alphabet is gone. So definitely have that.
So Dot, early on, you talked about being diversified with a variety of skill sets, like you were doing different segments or skill sets in staffing. And then you got just into the events and conferences. Now, your business now today, does look similar in the sense that you are back to doing mainly events and conventions, but diversification can mean a lot of different things, right? So, I mean, you can diversify your business in ways other than skill sets. So tell us, how your business looks now and how you still feel like you've got some diversification.
Well, the diversification for me right now is to be clear on everybody. I'm telling you what I know is the right thing. And it's been something that I'm still struggling with because after COVID, when everything opened up again, I was one of the few that was standing that had any experience. And so my business came back 10 times what it was before. Like I told you, I'm God's favorite. That's a different seminar. But like every year I've been going up like 60%, but that's because my diversification was really more relational to where we're doing it. So I started doing this in all 50 states. That was something new 2 years ago. Okay. Here's where that is a type of diversification because we have been let me just think of a couple 9/11, um, Katrina. There are things that happen locally that if you end up losing that local market, like if I was a staffing agency that only staffed New Orleans Convention Center, again, I'd be out of business. Right? 9/11 really hurt New York City for a very long time. So there, for me, I've experienced my growth and my diversification. We're on a national level. Having said that, I'm going to tell you that I'm not saying that I'm doing everything correctly. I need to build that other book of business, not just for survival, but for resale. That I need to make my business more valuable to more people. And there are so many different ways to take it. So where I'd love to sit here and say, I took all my advice. I've built the best thing out there. Look at me go. I'm telling you, that is something I'm still struggling with it. The difference is that I have the head knowledge to know why it needs to be done. And also because of my past, I know how to do it. And that would be something that as soon as we kind of come up for air, it's been like drinking water through a fire hose for the last 3 years. And, we're building a new company, a new brand, a new process. I've never dealt in the volume that I'm dealing with now, 160 people for a week in a new market. How do you do that? I know how to do that now. I'm getting really good at it. But it's not good enough. If there was another virus tomorrow, you guys, I would be in so much trouble. It's imperative that you have something to fall back on.
Yeah. Just not being complacent, always looking for the right opportunity. So diversification, I mean, can also mean, service and solutions like adding an SOW program, direct hire, MSP. It could be, serving diverse client industries, size of clients, focusing on your client concentration. So lots of different ways, even your internal team, right? Making sure that your internal team has diverse skills. So I'm going to get Andrea and Mark involved here. Any ideas or suggestions on how you keep your businesses diversified? Doesn't mean that you can't specialize, right? But how do you keep your businesses diversified?
So we actually have a question as well, and it's what do you think about specializing, becoming a niche agency? I think Dot definitely talked through that, but I think same for us, right? For COVID, I think 2 years in, we actually lost one of our largest financial services clients. And that was the biggest piece of our revenue for that. So I have now had to take on the mission of making us as recession proof as possible, and that doesn't mean expanding or changing what we're good at. It's going into different industries, right? We have to look at where life sciences industry is booming, right? Pharma is booming. We know that. And we don't do nurses, so that's not something we look into. But aerospace and defense, we know is starting to come up as well. We're right in the heart of Silicon Valley. So we know that Google and Meta, they're still laying off people. They're still going through that cycle. So that's not the direction that we want to go. So I think for me, it's just making sure we're in as many industries as possible to be as recession proof as possible.
Yeah. Mark, anything to add there?
Well, I picked a little bit different path than the two ladies. I had a deep background in direct hire recruiting at executive levels. And so I've always told my wife, if I got to put food on the table, I'll go do that in my spare time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
One recommendation I would make for anybody who's looking for something to diversify into. Again, I'm locked in right now just based on volume. Volume and age are directing my current path. I will tell you that. But let's face it, you guys, electricians, this world is going electric. There are not enough electricians. If I had to pick right now, if I was willing to say, okay, I'm going to specialize in something that I know is going to be needed 20 years from now, 25 years from now, it won't matter if there's a virus or not. It would be electricians. I would specialize in that. I would partner with every trade school out there. HVAC would be another one because nobody's doing it.
Right.
And they need those people. They'll pay top dollar. You can think outside the box. You can make magic happen. That's if I had it in me.
Yeah.
I've got a great idea. I don't have it in me.
For everybody else out there.
I don't even have it in me to put my hair up, right? So, but I do know. I do. After 26 years, I do know, and I'm telling you, that one is that is hot, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Andrea, you mentioned something about losing your top client or one of your top clients, and which makes me think obviously of client concentration and being in funding. This is the one mistake that we see so many new, startup, new, smaller staffing agency owners make, is they don't focus on that client concentration component of their business. They get one or two clients. They've got one client that's 75% of their business, and they're not focused on adding new business. We have seen so many staffing owners lose their shorts and actually close up shop because they've either lost that account, or the business goes away, or the client stops paying and they file for bankruptcy or whatever. Yeah, and then they're stuck. And I know when I was managing an area or district for Spherion, I always got a little bit nervous if any of my branches had a client that was more than, say, 20 to 25% of their total revenue. That was just my personal comfort level. Anytime I would see one client creeping above that percentage of total volume, I always wanted to know what their pipeline looked like for new business coming in. Because you lose that one client, that's half of your business or 3/4 of your business. And it's really, really tough. And we see it all the time here. Yeah. In funding. So yeah, I just think that I always think of that as part of diversification, is making sure that you're really cognizant of how concentrated you are.
Sherry, I have a little bit of a different spin on a unique situation versus, the virus that hit us all. I mentioned that Wichita's the air capital. We build a lot of airplanes here because there's 300 sunny, flyable days a year. But when the two 737s crashed back in 19 and 20, we make the 737 fuselage in Wichita. That company was the largest employer in Wichita, and we went from making 58 fuselages per month to 0. And so our client base was the parts manufacturers, parts coders, parts testers, all that kind of stuff. And they are just now back to, I think it's 34 fuselages a month. And so it was a punch to the gut for the entire MSA, and we're still not back 5 years later. So diversification, and I got my direct hire hat on, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and that's the big thing too, Mark. It's we don't realize actually how long it takes to get a new client sometimes, and even ramp up to recoup the revenue that we did lose. So it's just, you constantly have to be looking for new logos or new industries to break into.
Yeah,
right.
For sure. Well, this wraps up our three main topics that we wanted to talk about today. Now I'm going to just jump over here and see if we have any open questions. And if we don't have any open questions, I'll have you guys, the three of you, maybe just share some last bit of advice, even if it's off topic, even if it's something about sales and marketing or, back office, or I don't care, whatever it is. But let me see if we have, What did I just do here? Do you guys see any questions? Because I'm not seeing questions.
Nope, Dot answered the one question we had.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, so let's start with Andrea. Any last bit of advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I took over my parents' business, that was the company that they built. It was the culture that they wanted. Everybody was happy with that. But I also realized that even though I'm a version of my parents, I'm not fully my parents, and I couldn't expect people to be that I could be my parents or my dad or my mom, right? We are all different people. So when it comes to, I think, having to rebuild some of our teams, I've had to find people that I would want to work with, that I would want, that share the same values that I have for the company that I'm creating and building for the future, not my parents' version of ATR. So I think that's sometimes we always just have to evolve. It's kind of what Dot is, she's redoing everything all over again, right? But sometimes that also helps us create something different and something that is a new version of what we need to be in the moment.
Yeah, perfect. Dot, any last words of wisdom or advice that you haven't, or you've shared it all?
I feel I've shared it all. I'm pretty transparent and I'm pretty enthusiastic. There's just infinite ways to lose your business, but there's also infinite ways to grow it. And, just smile and dial. Get those yellow pages.
Yeah. Well, they say, innovation is one of the common denominators of success in a business, right? Is constantly inventing. What are you going to do next, right? So anyway, okay, Mark, we're going to end with your final words of wisdom.
We have one question, Sherry, actually.
Oh, we do? Oh, okay. So before Mark goes, Andrea, can you share the question?
It says how to deal with agencies running low rates to get in the door. I'm happy to answer that one because I'm in the MSP world. So that is my whole world. I think if it's a client that you really want, then you can do that. But I think you also just have to take fully into account the operation costs and if you're actually going to make money off of it, what type of industry it's in. For us, manufacturing can sometimes cause us more problems. It's even that they're low margin. Sometimes it's just not worth it. And especially if it's a client that you're working through an MSP, there's also added fees to it. So just make sure you understand the whole picture.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. All right. Mark, last words of wisdom.
Well, in one of the prior topics that we talked about, I mentioned that people do business with people. Well, on the flip side to that, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to help the entire organization be efficient enough that the people can be more people-y. And so I've taken the more tech savvy people on my staff and told them, you have 1 hour a week to educate yourself on AI. We jointly picked a class that we could do online. I think it's 46 hours. We're all going through it. And we've now got that base knowledge that when the tools come at us, because we're going to see millions of tools that are being developed, or if we decide to build our own agent, we have the base level knowledge to do it. And so I don't think we can ignore the impact that is going to be AI on our business. And I think if you're not educating yourself on a daily or weekly basis, you're going to get behind because it speeds things up quickly.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. So for those on the call, when I send out the link to the recording and the deck, I will also include a way to get a hold of these 3 agency owners. I'm assuming 3 of you don't mind. I promised that before I asked permission. Anyway, okay, we're going to let everybody go. Thank you, panelists, for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. And everybody have a great rest of their day.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.